I wasn't supposed to find it. That's the thing about secrets. They don't announce themselves. They sit quietly in the dark, tucked between the pages of a Bible, waiting for the one moment you least expect it. Waiting for a Tuesday afternoon in October, when the house smells like cinnamon candles, and the leaves outside are turning gold, and you think, foolishly, that your life is exactly what it appears to be. I was cleaning Cassie's old room. She doesn't live with us anymore, hasn't for 3 years, ever since she married Tom and moved 40 minutes north to a house Derek helped them buy. But she still keeps a few things here. A box of college photos, some old sweaters she never picks up, and her Bible, the white leather one I gave her for her 16th birthday, with her name embossed in gold on the cover, Cassandra Marie Holbrook. I wasn't snooping, I want to be very clear about that. I was dusting the bookshelf, and the Bible slipped. It always did. The spine was worn and the cover had lost its grip years ago. When it hit the floor, something fluttered out. A piece of paper, folded twice, with no name on the outside. I almost put it back without reading it. Almost. I don't know what made me open it. Some instinct, some small quiet voice in the back of my mind that had been trying to get my attention for months, maybe longer. The handwriting was Cassie's. I'd know it anywhere. Loopy left-leaning, the letters crowding each other like they were cold. Mom is getting worse. Dee says we need to move faster. He's already talked to the bank about the joint account. If she keeps asking questions, we tell her it's the memory stuff again. She believes it every time. God forgive me, but this has to work. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the edge of Cassie's bed, the same bed where I'd sat 1,000 times to tuck her in, to talk through her heartbreaks, to hold her when her father and I fought, and the walls of this house felt too thin, and I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just sat there, very still, while the world I thought I lived in quietly collapsed around me. Derek, my husband of 26 years. The memory stuff. For the past 8 months, Derek had been telling me gently, with such practiced concern that I'd been forgetting things. Small things at first. Where I put my keys, whether I'd taken my vitamins, then bigger things. Appointments I supposedly missed. Conversations I had no memory of. He'd even taken me to see Dr. Paulson, our family physician, and sat beside me in that sterile office holding my hand while he described my episodes to a man who'd known us both for 15 years. I'd believed him. God help me, I had believed every word. I'd started to wonder if I was losing my mind. I'd started to feel afraid of myself, afraid of my own memory, my own perception. I'd stopped arguing when Derek made financial decisions without consulting me. I'd stopped questioning why my name had been quietly removed from the investment account I'd contributed to for 2 decades. He told me I'd agreed to it. He told me it was simpler this way. He told me it was for my own protection. And I had believed him. Because that's what you do when you love someone. When you've built a life with someone, when you have no reason, or so you think, to doubt them. I folded the note back up. I put it in my cardigan pocket. I finished dusting the shelf, and then I walked downstairs, put on the kettle, and began to think. My name is Linda Holbrook. I'm 52 years old. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, the youngest of 4 children, the only girl. My mother was a school teacher. My father worked at a textile plant until it closed, and then he worked at a hardware store until his knees gave out. We weren't rich, but we were stable. We were careful. We were people who believed that if you worked hard and kept your word and treated others the way you wanted to be treated, life would be fair. I know. I met Derek Holbrook at a 4th of July party in 1996. He was 28. I was 26. He had dark hair and an easy laugh, and he brought me a glass of lemonade without being asked. And I thought, this is a man who notices people. We were married 11 months later. I wore my mother's veil. My father cried during the vows. We had Cassie 2 years after that. Then Marcus, 3 years after Cassie. Marcus lives in Seattle now. He's an engineer, quiet and steady, more like me than like his father. Cassie has always been Derek's daughter. Same brightness, same charm, Same ability to make you feel like the center of the universe when she looks at you, and like a ghost when she looks away. I spent the first 20 years of my marriage building a home. That's not a metaphor. I mean, I literally built it. I painted every room. I refinished the kitchen cabinets. I planted the garden in the backyard that Derek has taken to calling our garden at dinner parties, as though he's ever held a trowel. I raised the children through fevers and nightmares and college applications. I managed the household accounts with a precision that bordered on obsessive, because we didn't always have a lot, and I was determined that we would never run out. Derek runs a commercial real estate firm. He does well, he always has, and somewhere along the way, I can't pinpoint exactly when my contributions started to disappear from the story he told about our life. The story became about his career, his deals, his success. I became the background, the context, the woman who kept the house warm so that the important things could happen inside it. I told myself I didn't mind. I told myself a lot of things. Here's what I knew. Sitting at my kitchen table with my tea going cold, Derek and Cassie were working together. The note was proof of that. The memory stuff was a fabrication, or at least an exaggeration, a story they were using to position me as unreliable, as someone who couldn't be trusted to manage her own affairs. The joint account. He'd talked to the bank about the joint account. My mind went immediately to the number, $340,000. That was the approximate balance the last time I'd checked, which now that I thought about it, had been almost a year ago. Derek had started handling the finances to take some of the stress off me after I supposedly forgot to pay the electric bill twice, which I hadn't, which I now understood I hadn't. But there was something else, something the note had jogged loose. 3 months ago, my Aunt Ruth had died. Ruth was my mother's sister, the one who never married, never had children, lived alone in a farmhouse in Asheville with 4 cats and a garden that put mine to shame. I loved Aunt Ruth. She was sharp-tongued and funny, and she always sent me birthday cards that said exactly what she thought, which was more than most people ever managed. At her funeral, her lawyer, a thin man named Gerald Watts, had pressed my hand and said, very quietly, "She left you something, Linda, something substantial. I'll be in touch." He had never been in touch, or had he? I pressed my fingers to my temples. Gerald Watts had called the house. I remembered now, or I thought I remembered. Derek had answered. He told me it was a telemarketer. I hadn't thought anything of it. She believes it every time. My hands were perfectly steady as I pulled out my phone and searched for Gerald Watts, a state attorney, Asheville, North Carolina. He picked up on the second ring. When I told him my name, there was a pause. And then, "Mrs. Holbrook, I've been trying to reach you for months." Gerald Watts had sent 3 letters. None of them had reached me. He had called the house 4 times, always during the day, when Derek was supposedly at work, which meant Derek had been home at least 4 of those times without my knowledge. Or had call forwarding set up, or had intercepted the mail. I didn't know which yet. What I knew was that Ruth had left me her farmhouse in Asheville, paid off, valued at a little over $400,000, and a savings account with $87,000 in it. A total inheritance of nearly $500,000. Gerald had also, at Ruth's specific instruction, left a personal letter for me. He read it to me over the phone because he didn't trust the mail anymore. Not after I told him what had been happening. "Linda," it said, "you were always the one who truly saw me. The one who called just to talk, not just on holidays. I know your life hasn't been easy, though you'd never say so. This is yours. Don't let anyone take it from you. Love, Ruth." I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes after I hung up with Gerald. The afternoon light was fading. Inside the house, I could hear Derek's car in the garage. He'd come home early, which he'd been doing a lot lately. Always nearby, always watching. I thought about what Cassie's note had said. He's already talked to the bank about the joint account. I thought about the inheritance that had been hidden from me for 3 months. I thought about 8 months of being quietly, systematically convinced that my memory was failing, that I was unreliable, confused, a woman who needed to be managed, and I realized something that straightened my spine like cold water. This wasn't new. This wasn't a recent scheme born of greed or desperation. This was a pattern. This was something that had been built slowly, over years, so gradually that I hadn't seen it for what it was. The way Derek always spoke for me at social gatherings. The way he summarized my opinions to other people, slightly wrong, and then looked at me with such patient fondness when I tried to correct him, as if my correction was itself a symptom of something. The way Cassie had started echoing his versions of events, the way Marcus, far away in Seattle, had started calling with a certain worried tone, asking me gently how I was really doing. They had been building a case, not for a court of law, for the court of family opinion, the kind where you don't need evidence, just consensus. Just enough people nodding along for long enough that the story becomes true. I had been so busy trying to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind that I had never stopped to ask why it was so important to them that I believe I was now. I knew why. I need to tell you about the money, because it matters. When Derek and I married, I had $18,000 in savings. Money I'd earned as a paralegal for 4 years after college. Carefully set aside, living below my means the way my parents had taught me. Derek had his starting salary and a family name that opened doors, but not much liquid cash. My $18,000 became the down payment on our first house. Over the years, I managed every household dollar with that same careful precision. When Derek's business grew, I kept us from spending beyond our means. When he wanted to buy a boat, I sat down with a spreadsheet and showed him why we shouldn't. Not yet. He called me a killjoy. I called it strategy. 2 years later, when his biggest client walked, that discipline was the only reason we didn't lose the house. I had also, quietly, and without fanfare, been building my own small cushion. Not a secret account, nothing like that, but an investment account in my name. Started with money I made selling hand-painted furniture in my late 30s, then a small interior decorating business I'd run out of the house for years. Derek called it my little hobby. His clients' wives called me when they needed their homes staged for sale, and I charged them well and invested every dollar I could. That account had grown to $98,000. Last month, Derek had suggested we consolidate accounts, simplify things. He'd said, especially with your confusion lately. He'd presented me with paperwork. I'd hesitated. He'd looked at me with those patient, sad eyes and said, "Linda, I'm just trying to take care of you." I had not signed the paperwork. I told him I needed time to think. He'd been agitated ever since. Now I understood why. The architecture of a lie, I was learning, is not built in a day. It's built the way houses are built, foundation first, then walls, then roof. By the time you notice you're inside it, the structure feels permanent. Natural, like it was always there. Derek had laid the foundation years ago, with small things. A look exchanged with Cassie at dinner when I said something, a slightly too patient tone when he repeated my own words back to me. A habit of being the one who interfaced with doctors, accountants, lawyers, always helpful, always so capable, until I had quietly ceded those territories without realizing I'd surrendered anything. Then the walls. The forgotten appointments, the confusion. Dr. Paulson's cautious, non-judgmental questions about my memory. Had I considered that stress could affect cognitive function? Had I thought about coming back for some more detailed assessments? I had been embarrassed. I had declined the further assessments. Derek had squeezed my hand in the parking lot and said that was my choice. Of course, but he worried about me. The roof was the inheritance. $487,000 of it, sitting in ash still waiting, while Gerald Watt's letters disappeared and phone calls went unanswered, and I sat in my kitchen convincing myself I was going crazy. I was not going crazy, I was being robbed. That evening, Derek made pasta for dinner. He was a good cook, one of the things I'd always genuinely loved about him, and he put on Norah Jones and poured wine and asked me about my day. With the warmth and attentiveness of a man who had nothing to hide. I cleaned Cassie's room. I said, He twirled pasta on his fork. She's coming Sunday, by the way. Bringing Tom. Oh, I kept my voice even warm. Even that'll be nice. She's worried about you, Derek said, and there it was. The slight drop in his voice, the careful tenderness. We both are. I know, I said. You've both been so good to me. I smiled at him across the dinner table. He smiled back, and I thought, I have exactly 12 days. The first thing I did was call my brother Ray. Ray is 56, lives in Charlotte, and has the blunt, practical energy of a man who spent 30 years as a general contractor. We hadn't been as close in recent years. Derek found him rough, and Ray found Derek slick, and over time I'd let their mutual dislike reduce my contact with my own family, without fully acknowledging that was what had happened. Ray picked up on the first ring. He always did for me. I told him everything. The note, the letters, Gerald Watts, the account, the memory stuff. All of it, sitting in my car in the Trader Joe's parking lot with the engine running, speaking quietly and clearly the way I used to speak in the conference rooms of the law firm where I'd worked before marriage, when I was a woman who presented information and expected to be taken seriously. Ray didn't say a word until I finished. Then he said, Linda, how long has this been going on? I don't know exactly, I said. Maybe years. The inheritance, that's 3 months. The memory thing, 8 months. But Ray, I think it's been longer than that in ways I couldn't see. A pause. What do you need? That was Ray. No drama. No, I told you so. Just, what do you need? I need a lawyer, I said. A good one. A divorce attorney specifically, but I also need someone who understands financial fraud. I know someone, he said immediately. Patricia Okafor. She handled my business partner's divorce when his wife tried to hide assets. She's the best I know. I'll call her today. Don't call from your regular number. Another pause. Linda, I know how that sounds, but they're organized, Ray. This wasn't spontaneous. I need to be organized too. Okay, he said. I'll call her from my office landline. She'll hear from me within the hour. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. Thank you. You don't thank me, Ray said. You're my sister. Patricia Okafor called me at 4 p.m. while Derek was in his home office on a call. I sat in my garden, his garden, supposedly, and spoke with her for 45 minutes. She was exactly what Ray had promised. Calm, precise, and impossible to intimidate. She'd been practicing family law for 22 years, and she had, in her words, seen this pattern before, in various forms and at various speeds. She called it financial abuse. She said it carefully, the way you hand someone something heavy, letting me feel the weight of it before asking me to carry it. I don't know why, but hearing those words said plainly, by a professional, without drama or hysteria, it did something to me. It settled something. I had not been imagining things. I was not confused or unreliable or losing my mind. I was a woman who had been systematically undermined by people I loved, for reasons that were entirely calculated. Patricia asked me to do 5 things in the next 12 days, before I made any move that could be detected. First, get the original note, photograph it, but also preserve the physical document. Second, make a full list of every financial account, asset, and property I was aware of from memory, without accessing anything Derek might monitor. Third, contact Gerald Watts formally and get all documentation of the inheritance in order, including proof of the intercepted correspondence. Fourth, visit Dr. Paulson independently, without Derek, and ask for a full cognitive assessment. I want a clean record showing your baseline, Patricia said. If this goes to court, and it might, I want documentation that directly contradicts the narrative they've been building. Fifth, say nothing. Behave normally. Do not confront Derek or Cassie. Do not change your routine. Do not give any indication that anything has changed. Can you do that? Patricia asked. Yes, I said. And I meant it. The days that followed were the strangest of my life. I moved through them like an actress who has fully memorized her role. I made breakfast. I asked Derek about his deals. I texted Cassie about her Sunday visit and sent her a recipe for the apple cake she likes. I sat across from my husband at dinner 5 nights in a row and looked at his face, the face I had loved for 26 years. The face I had kissed goodnight 10,000 times, and I saw it differently now. Not with hatred, not even with rage, with a kind of clear, cold clarity, like looking through glass that had finally been cleaned. I had always known, on some level, that Derek was a man who needed to win. It had been charming once, that competitive drive, that confident stride through the world. I'd thought it was just business. I hadn't understood, until now, that the competition extended to me. That our marriage, in his mind, had always been a negotiation in which the goal was to accumulate, and I was one of the assets on the table. I found myself thinking about moments I'd filed away as trivial. The time he'd spoken over me at a dinner party to correct something I'd said about our own finances, something I'd been right about. The way he always knew where my phone was, where my keys were, where I was going, who I'd spoken to. I had called it attentiveness. He called it love. I now had a different word for it. I did not share these revelations with anyone except Patricia and Ray. I found the cognitive assessment the most surreal hour of my 12 days. Dr. Paulson was visibly surprised to see me come in alone, without Derek. He was more surprised when I explained, calmly and factually, that I was requesting a comprehensive evaluation, and that I would prefer it not be documented in my shared medical portal, the one Derek had access to. Dr. Paulson had been our physician for 15 years. He is a good man. I watched his face as I spoke, and I watched something shift in it, a slight reordering, a recalibration. He didn't say, "Are you sure?" He didn't say, "Derek mentioned you'd been struggling." He just listened, and then he said, "Of course, Linda. Let's get started." I aced every portion of the assessment. Not a single flag. Not a single gap. Dr. Paulson printed the results himself and handed them to me in a sealed envelope. "I have to say," he told me quietly, "your recall is exceptional." "It always was," I said. On the 10th day, I went to Asheville. I told Derek I was visiting my friend Beverly, which was not entirely untrue, as Beverly does live 40 minutes outside Asheville, and I did have lunch with her. But first I went to Gerald Watt's office, signed the documents accepting my inheritance, and stood in the doorway of Aunt Ruth's farmhouse while Gerald gave me the key. It was a white house with a wide porch. There was a willow tree in the front yard that Ruth had planted when she was 30. The cats were gone, a neighbor had taken them, but the garden was still there, going a little wild at the edges, the way Ruth had liked it. I stood on that porch for a long time. I thought about Ruth writing her letter to me. "You were always the one who truly saw me." She had seen me too. More than I'd known. I cried then for the first time since finding the note. Not the frantic, broken crying of a woman who doesn't know what to do. The slower kind. The kind that washes things clean. Then I locked the door, put the key in my purse, and drove back to my other life for exactly 2 more days. Cassie arrived at 11. She came in the way she always did, filling the room, bringing noise and energy and that particular brightness she'd always had. Tom was quiet and pleasant the way he always was, a kind man who I suspected understood very little of what his wife did when he wasn't watching. They'd brought a bottle of wine and a cheese board, and Cassie kissed my cheek and said I looked well, and in her eyes I saw something I recognized now as surveillance. She was checking me. Measuring me against whatever benchmark she and Derek had established. I gave her nothing to work with. I was bright and warm and present. I asked about their new patio furniture. I laughed at Tom's story about a raccoon that had gotten into their garage. I served the apple cake I'd made from her recipe, and accepted her compliment with genuine pleasure. Derek was relaxed. More relaxed than I'd seen him in weeks. He kept catching Cassie's eye across the table with that small, private look they had, the one I'd always interpreted as family shorthand, The unconscious communication of people who know each other well. Now I read it differently. They were reassuring each other. Everything was proceeding normally. Linda was fine. Linda was manageable. After lunch, while the men watched football, Cassie helped me clean up in the kitchen. This was the moment I'd been most afraid of. Cassie has always been able to read me. She got that from Derek, that antenna for other people's hidden frequencies. I had spent 10 days preparing for this kitchen, this afternoon, this proximity to my daughter's eyes. "Mom," she said, drying a bowl, "have you thought any more about what Dad said, about the accounts?" "A little," I said pleasantly. "I'm still thinking. He just wants to simplify things." Her voice was careful, measured. "It makes sense, especially if," she stopped. "Especially if what?" I asked, perfectly mildly. "If you're going through a lot," she finished. "Stress affects people, Mom. It's okay to let him help." I handed her a wet plate. "You're right," I said. "It's something to think about." I watched her shoulders relax by a fraction. Good, I thought. Keep thinking exactly that. After they left, Derek was in an excellent mood. He suggested we watch a movie. He made popcorn. He put his arm around me on the couch the way he hadn't in months, and I sat inside that arm and felt the warmth of it and the wrongness of it simultaneously, like holding something beautiful that you know is hollow inside. He fell asleep before the movie ended. I sat in the dark and listened to him breathe. I thought about 26 years. About the things that had been real, and there were real things. I needed to hold on to that. Needed to resist the urge to revise everything into something simple and clean. The early years had been good. He had been, in many ways, a good father. There had been joy in this house. Real joy. But joy and manipulation can live in the same house. Love and exploitation can wear the same face. That was perhaps the hardest thing, not the betrayal itself, but the understanding that both things were true. That I had been genuinely loved and genuinely deceived, that the man asleep beside me was neither a monster nor innocent, that the story was complicated, and the complication didn't change what I had to do. I had an appointment with Patricia on Wednesday. I could wait. Patricia had found things. I want to be clear, I had not hired a private investigator, had not hacked any accounts, had not done anything that could be characterized as underhanded. Patricia had simply done what competent attorneys do. She had pulled public records, requested documentation from Gerald Watts, and asked me to authorize access to financial records that were legally mine. What she found was worse than I'd expected. The joint account had been reduced by $140,000 over 18 months. Derek had moved the money in increments small enough not to trigger automatic alerts. A practice Patricia noted with grim professional recognition. "This is deliberate," she said, sliding a printout across her desk. "This is not someone making careless decisions. This is someone who knows how to move money quietly." The investment account, my account, the one built from my furniture sales and decorating business, had not yet been touched. The paperwork he'd presented me with, had I signed it, would have given him ownership and power of attorney over it. I had not signed it. There was more. 6 months ago, Derek had taken out a policy on my behalf, life insurance, with himself as beneficiary, for $750,000. He had signed it with what appeared to be my signature. I had no memory of signing it. I had never agreed to it. Patricia set that document on the desk between us very carefully and let me look at it for a long moment before she spoke. "I want to walk you through what this means legally," she said, "and I want to do that very carefully. But I also want to ask you directly, do you feel safe at home?" I looked at the document. I thought about a life insurance policy I hadn't signed, for $750,000. "I think," I said slowly, "that the plan was financial. I think the goal was the accounts and the inheritance, and that everything else was scaffolding to make me appear incompetent. I think the life insurance was an insurance policy in the more literal sense, backup, in case I caught on and he needed another option." Patricia looked at me for a long moment. That may be true, she said. And I hope it is. But I don't want to assume. She gave me a number for a local domestic safety resource. I put it in my phone under Beverly's name. I also called Marcus that night. Marcus answered from Seattle at 9 p.m. his time, which meant midnight mine. I'd waited on purpose. Derek was asleep and I was in the garden with a blanket and my phone in the cold October air that smelled like wood smoke and late roses. My son listened the way he always listened, with complete attention, with a stillness that he'd had since he was small, the kind of stillness that means a person is truly hearing you and not just waiting to respond. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Mom, he finally said, I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, always. Did you know? Some part of you, did you know, before you found the note? I thought about it. Truly thought about it. I knew something was wrong, I said. I just kept telling myself I was wrong about it being wrong. Does that make sense? Yeah, Marcus said. His voice was rough. Yeah, it does. I need to know something too, I said. They called you. They told you I was struggling. What did they tell you? Another pause. Longer this time. Dad called me in February. He said you'd been having memory issues and mood swings and that you'd been hostile about the finances. He said they were worried you might make decisions that could hurt yourself and that he needed family support to help him manage the situation. A pause. He used that word, manage. I closed my eyes briefly. February, 8 months ago. Before the forged insurance document. Before the inheritance. Derek had been building his coalition for longer than I'd realized. I should have called you, Marcus said. I should have called you directly and asked you, not just, I'm sorry, Mom, I'm so sorry. You believed your father, I said. He's good at being believed. What do you need from me? The same question Ray had asked. My quiet, steady people. I had not lost them, they had just been misled. The difference mattered. I need you to be my witness, I said, to what I'm about to tell you. And I need you not to contact your father or your sister until I tell you it's time. Okay, Marcus said, without hesitation. I'm here. Patricia filed the initial papers on a Thursday. We had been meticulous. Every account documented. The forged insurance signature flagged and sent to a forensic document examiner. A preliminary analysis had already suggested it was not my handwriting. The intercepted correspondence from Gerald Watts documented and sworn to the cognitive assessment on record. Cassie's note, the original, not a photo, in Patricia's safe. Derek was served on a Friday morning, at his office, by a process server who had done this for 30 years and had exactly the demeanor for it. Derek called me 45 seconds later. I let it go to voicemail. He left 6 messages that day. They went in a progression I now recognized as familiar. Concern, then confusion, then explanation, then a gentle suggestion that I wasn't thinking clearly, then, finally, anger. 6 messages and he had moved through the whole architecture of his manipulation in real time. Like watching a building go up and fast forward. I did not respond to any of them. I was already not at home. I had moved to Aunt Ruth's farmhouse 3 days before Derek was served. I'd done it quietly. On a Wednesday, while Derek had a lunch meeting in Durham. I took my personal documents, my laptop, my grandmother's silver, 3 boxes of clothing, and the hand-painted quilt my mother had made for my wedding. I left everything else exactly as it was. Ray had driven down from Charlotte to help me. We worked quickly and efficiently, speaking very little. When the truck was loaded, Ray looked at me across the top of it and said, "You okay?" "I will be," I said. And I believed it. The farmhouse was cold at first. Ruth had been gone since July, and October in the mountains has teeth. But Ray stayed for 2 days and helped me get the heat working and checked the plumbing. And Beverly came over with soup and opinions and made me laugh for the first time in what felt like months. Real laughter, the kind that comes from somewhere unguarded. I slept in Ruth's room, in her brass bed, under 4 quilts. The first night I woke at 3 a.m. and lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of a house. I didn't know yet the creak of old wood, the wind in the willow tree, something small moving in the attic. I thought I might be afraid. I wasn't. I felt something that took me a moment to name. Safe. I felt safe. Cassie called on Saturday. I let her call 3 times before I picked up. Not as a power move. I'm not built for power moves, but because I needed to be ready. I needed to have arrived, fully, at the version of myself that could have this conversation without breaking apart or shutting down. Mom. Her voice was tight. She'd been crying, or trying not to. Mom, what is happening? Dad is. I know what's happening, I said quietly. A silence. Mom, you don't understand the full picture, Cassie. I kept my voice even, warm, even, the way I'd kept it through that Sunday lunch. Except now, it wasn't a performance. It was just me. I found your note. In your Bible. The one about moving faster and the bank account, and telling me it was the memory stuff. The silence this time was different. Longer. The silence of someone who has been caught so completely that there is, for a moment, nothing to say. Mom, I'm not calling to fight, I said. I'm not going to scream at you. I don't want that, and I don't think you do either. I paused. But I need you to know that I know. All of it. The letters from Gerald Watts. The insurance policy. The account withdrawals. I have documentation of everything, and so does my attorney. I heard her breath catch. I have one question for you, I said, and I'd like you to answer it honestly, because I think some part of you is still the daughter I raised. Was any of it, any part of this, your idea? Or did you follow your father's lead? The silence stretched. I waited. When Cassie finally spoke, her voice had changed. Stripped of its brightness, its management. It sounded younger, smaller. He said you were already losing it, she whispered. He said it was just a matter of time and that if we didn't protect the family assets, you'd make decisions you couldn't take back. He made it sound like he was taking care of you, of all of us. And the insurance policy? I asked. I didn't know about that, she said. Very quickly. Then, slower. I swear to you, Mom, I didn't know about that. I believed her. I don't know if I should have. Patricia might argue I was too willing to give her grace, but I had raised this girl. I knew her voice when she was lying, and I knew it when she wasn't. The note in the Bible had been participation in something wrong. The insurance policy was something else, something darker. And I thought it genuinely hadn't reached her. Okay, I said. Mom, I'm so sorry, I know, I said. I believe you, but Cassie, you have to understand that sorry isn't enough right now. What was done to me has to have consequences. Not to hurt you. But because I spent 8 months being told I was losing my mind by my own family, and that cannot simply be apologized away. She cried then. Not the polished tears I'd seen her use for effect over the years. These were the ugly, undignified kind. The kind you can't manage. Is there anything I can do? She asked. Yes, I said. Be honest with my attorney when she contacts you. All of it. Everything you know. A long pause. Okay, she said. Okay, Mom, I will. The divorce proceedings took 11 months. Derek hired an aggressive attorney, and the early stages were combative. He attempted to use the memory concerns narrative, which collapsed almost immediately under the weight of Dr. Paulson's assessment, and the forensic analysis of the insurance signature. His attorney pivoted. Derek pivoted. He tried cooperation, then contrition, then negotiation. Patricia was immovable. The final settlement gave me, my investment account intact, 50% of the joint account balance as it stood at the time of filing. The marital home which I sold, because I no longer wanted it, and a decade of spousal support commensurate with my contribution to the household and his career over 26 years. The forged insurance signature was referred to the district attorney's office. I did not push for criminal charges myself. That was Patricia's counsel, and I accepted it. The DA's office investigated and ultimately declined to prosecute, citing insufficient evidence of intent. Derek's attorney argued the signature was a clerical error. Maybe a jury would have seen it differently. Maybe not. I had made my peace with not knowing. What mattered was that it was on record. That somewhere, in a file in a county courthouse, there was documentation of what had been attempted. That it did not disappear the way those letters had disappeared. That it was not forgiven and forgotten the way things had been forgiven and forgotten for 26 years. Cassie testified honestly. I don't think it was easy for her. I think it cost her something with Derek that may be permanent. But she sat across from Patricia and told the truth about the conversations she'd had with her father, the plan she'd participated in, the ways she'd watched her mother be manipulated, and said nothing for reasons she could no longer fully justify to herself. She came to see me in Asheville a month after her deposition. She drove alone, on a Saturday, and we sat on Ruth's porch with tea and didn't talk for a long time. The willow tree had lost its leaves by then and stood in the cold air with a kind of stripped dignity that I found I appreciated. I've started seeing someone, she said, a therapist. Good, I said. She's helping me understand how I got to a place where I could do that, she said. To you. To myself. I'm glad. A pause. Are you angry at me? I thought about it carefully. The way I'd been trying to think about things carefully, with full attention, taking my time. Yes, I said. I love you completely, and I am also very angry at you, and I think both of those things are going to be true for a long time, and I think we can still find our way, if you want to. I want to, she said. Okay, I said. Then we will. Marcus flew in for Thanksgiving. He slept in the back bedroom, Ruth's craft room, which I'd converted, and he helped me fix the gate on the garden that had been swinging in the wind all November. We made a whole Thanksgiving dinner, just the two of us, and Beverly and her husband Dale. And there was something about the smallness of it that felt like an exhale. Like the first real breath after a long time of breathing around something. After dinner, Marcus and I sat on the porch with bourbon, a small concession to the mountain cold, and watched the dark come down over the hills. Can I tell you something? He said, always. When Dad called me in February, I almost called you right away. But I talked myself out of it. I told myself he probably knew better about what was happening in the house. He turned the glass in his hands. I've thought about that a lot, why I chose to trust him over you. And I think it was because he was louder. You were always there, always steady, and he made noise, and the noise felt like information. I nodded slowly. I think I made that mistake with you my whole life, he said. And I want to stop making it. I reached over and put my hand over his. My son, who is more like me than he sometimes knows. Quiet, steady, a careful keeper of things. We'll both practice, I said. I started a small business in the spring. Interior design and home staging, the work I'd done quietly for years. That Derek had called a hobby, that had funded the investment account he'd tried to take from me. I registered it properly this time. Got a website. Put my name on it, Linda Holbrook Design. My first commission was Ruth's farmhouse itself. I wasn't selling it, I wasn't ready for that, and I might never be, but I refreshed it. Painted the rooms, the colors I'd always wanted in my own home, and never been allowed. A deep, dusky green in the living room. A warm terracotta in the kitchen. The bedroom I'd kept in the quiet, clean white of old linens and cold air. I planted the garden in the spring too. Put in tomatoes and lavender and a rose bush along the fence that my mother used to grow, a variety called Climbing Peace, which I'd always loved for its name as much as its blossoms. Beverly took photos for my website. She said I looked different in them. Different how? I asked. Like you live here, she said. Like it's yours. I want to tell you about a moment that happened in June, about 14 months after I found the note. I was at a farmer's market in Asheville on a Saturday morning, looking at tomato starts. A woman stopped beside me, mid-50s, well-dressed, a certain careful quality to her stillness that I recognized now the way you recognize weather. Something coiled tight that was trying to look relaxed. Her husband was 3 stalls down. talking loudly about heirloom varieties and drawing the kind of attention that fills a room by taking up all the air. She was looking at a lavender bunch and not really seeing it. I didn't say anything grand or cinematic. I just said, quietly, "The lavender is beautiful this year." The vendor told me it grows especially well if you give it full sun and don't overwater it. She looked at me. Just looked at me the way people look when they've been invisible for a long time and someone has seen them. "Thank you," she said. I smiled and moved on. Maybe she went home and nothing changed. Maybe something shifted, barely perceptible, the first crack in a structure she'd one day find a way out of. I don't know. I will never know. What I know is that I planted lavender along my own fence and watched it come in, and the morning it bloomed I stood in the garden in the early light and felt something settle in me that had been unsettled for longer than I could name. Not happiness, exactly. Something quieter than that. Something more durable. I thought of Ruth's letter. "Don't let anyone take it from you." No one was going to take this. Derek and I have not spoken since the divorce was finalized. I don't think we will. I don't think there is a version of that conversation that would give either of us anything we need. Cassie and I speak every Sunday. It is careful still. The way new things are careful, like walking on ice, that's probably solid, but you test each step anyway. Some Sundays are better than others. Some Sundays she says something and I feel the old hurt move through me like a weather system. Cold and fast, and I have to wait for it to pass before I respond. I always wait now. I've learned that waiting is not weakness. It's the thing that makes everything else possible. Tom, Cassie's husband, sent me a card after the divorce. Just a card, no explanation, no lengthy message. It said, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. You deserved better." I kept it. It's in the drawer of the bedside table in Ruth's room. Marcus calls every Thursday. He asked me last month if I'd thought about dating again. Eventually, I said. "Good," he said. "Why good?" "Because you deserve someone who makes noise about the right things," he said, "about you, about how great you are." I laughed at that. "I don't know if I need someone to make noise." "Fair enough," he said. "Someone who sees you then." "That," I said, "would be something." Last month I sat on the porch of Ruth's farmhouse on an evening in early October, almost exactly 1 year since I'd found the note, and I watched the light move across the hills and thought about how strange it is, the way life can change in a single moment and yet feel like it took years to change. I had been the same woman for a long time. Steady, careful, quiet, present. Building things, maintaining things, loving things, letting my own voice go lower and lower until I couldn't hear it anymore over the noise of everything else. And then a Bible slipped off a shelf, and I heard it again. That voice, my voice. I have been listening to it ever since. I am 52 years old. I live in a white farmhouse in Asheville with a willow tree in the front yard and lavender along the fence and a terracotta kitchen and a business with my name on it. I am learning that the quiet strength I spent 26 years pouring into a life that didn't fully see me belongs to me, has always belonged to me, and can be redirected slowly, deliberately, like water finding a new course, toward a life that does. I am not bitter. I have worked hard not to be. Not for Derek's sake but for my own, because bitterness is a house with no windows, and I have had enough of closed rooms. I am not naive. I know what was done to me, and I hold that knowledge clearly, without softening it into something easier. I am, for the first time in a very long time, someone I recognize. And on the evenings when the light is good and the lavender is blooming and the willow is moving in a way that Ruth would have loved, I think, she would be so proud, and I think for the first time in a very long time that I am too. For every woman who has been told she is too much, not enough, or slowly losing her mind, you are not. You are simply in a house with the wrong windows. There are other houses. There is always still time to find them.